All right. Good evening, everybody. And let me I think I forgot to do a screen share. Anyway, I just went. Anyway, so you'd figure after 14 of these, we'd have it figured out, but so be it. With Jim Jones not here tonight to help out, these things happen. But anyway, welcome everybody, and this is the 14th of these weekly video conferences to talk about COVID-19. But this week we have a little bit of a different agenda. This week we'll start off hearing from Reverend Cheryl Harris to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the world. And then we'll hear from Senator Paul Feeney, State Rep Jim Hawkins, Catherine Fierick, Jay DeLisio, and then Steve Withers Jr. to talk about the schools. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. I know it's difficult to join on a Sunday night, and especially week after week. I definitely appreciate it. And so let's start things off with Reverend Harris. Reverend Harris, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's wonderful to be with this panel and to be with you, Todd. So you asked, go ahead.
With everything going on in the world, was hoping to hear from you, mostly to listen. I know a few of us were at the rally at Capron Park earlier today, which was it was incredibly emotional and touching and interesting to be there. And one of the things I've been struggling with is obviously condemn the actions that happened earlier, and it's tragic what happened to Mr. Floyd. But I struggle with also seeing the amount of protests as a positive thing, in hoping that some change may actually come out of that. And I was wondering what your thoughts are.
I'm getting that question quite a bit. Is this a moment or is this a movement? Is this just going to be a flash in the pan and everyone goes back to the way things were? And when I think about a movement, I think about it being a constellation of moments. And if we do something with it, then it becomes this greater movement. And secondly, I think about how does change happen? And change doesn't happen in a straight line. Change is always up and down, sometimes back and forward. But what's wonderful about change is that change happens. It cannot be stopped. It might get delayed. So from my perspective, I think that the whole movement has been generated by this tipping point of George Floyd's public murder. And as I was thinking about it, Todd, I thought about not just the officer with his knee jammed on Mr. Floyd's neck and the other officers standing around passively not intervening, but I also thought about the voices I heard from the bystanders. And the bystanders were also pleading for Mr. Floyd. Let him breathe. Let him breathe. Why can't you just let him breathe, man? I heard people saying. And I think for the reason why we've got people all over the world marching and people all over the country is because at this point, George Floyd symbolizes all of those who died before at the hands of police officers. Mm-hmm. And I think that for people, they said enough is enough. It was too much. And it finally sent people over the edge enough to say, we now need to go and walk in solidarity. Black and white, young and old, conservative and liberal. And that's what we're seeing in the street. So for me, that's why I think it's a movement, because we've got different people out there and we have white persons on the front line putting their bodies out at risk for harm and danger and protection and support of Black and brown bodies. We saw a little bit of that in the civil rights movement, not to this magnitude that we see today.
It was great for me I brought my son with me this afternoon to Capron Park, and I thought it was great for him to see that. And there was also, there was a lot of anger there, and I thought it was really good for him to feel that and experience it and to help him understand. Is there do you have suggestions for parents out there or anybody to help their kids understand what's going on?
Yeah, I have a couple of beliefs. One is you can cry and do anything, and you can be angry and avoid sinning. That it's possible for us to have anger and still do the right thing, and that there's a time for righteous anger, and this is the time for anger. It's been unleashed, no question about that. But what's also been unleashed is this cry for common decency and humanity and hopefulness. So I feel like this is an amazing opportunity that we have. Painful, yes, but also hopeful. And when I think about what do we need to say to the children, I think we need to let them know it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to sit on the sidelines and do nothing when you have the power to do something. And we all can do something. We all can take an action. We can all make a friend. We can all have a conversation. We can all look at what are the systems that are in place that are inhibiting people from being their best selves. So we all have something that we can do. And I wrote a few notes for myself, things that I wanted to leave people with. And one is, do not take the bait for hate. Do not take the bait for hate. There's so much going on where people are trying to fuel the darker sides of ourselves. And I say, no, let's appeal to the lighter, the more humane sides of ourselves, because we're all God's children. So don't take the bait for hate. Trust that love is the most durable power in the universe. And if we decide to love, that's a choice. Not be angry, but to choose love. That can fuel us into thinking creatively, innovatively, and imaginatively about what we can do. And that, I hope, if we choose love, don't take the bait for hate, choose love as the most durable power in the universe, that will fuel us, I believe, to ask powerful questions. What is it in the system that could be changed that would make a difference for the well-being of everybody? We need to ask those questions, not needless why questions, but those open-ended questions that help us think together and create something new and beautiful. And then the last thing is have conversations. Have conversations, get across differences, not just with the folks that we already know, who are going to say the things that we always hear, who are going to agree with us all the time, but the people who may not agree. And that's really, really hard, to have those conversations with people who don't agree. I often look at some of the Facebook posts that are on my page, want to pull my hair out. but we have the freedom of speech. We have the right to say and believe what we want. And I should be strong enough. Love should carry me enough to be able to listen without feeling threatened because someone has a different idea.
I love that. Love and hope. And in the article in the Sun Chronicle by you and the Attleboro Interfaith Collaborative was incredible. And with the focus on love and I see a lot of positive potentially coming out of this. I see, I mean, some real change over time, and things are obviously slow, but I'm optimistic, and hopefully that's good.
I'm optimistic too. In the area clergy, you probably know this, there's been a number of articles in the paper. We're hosting a Candlelight Vigil from people's homes because I still believe that we should be social distancing. Mm-hmm. I'm glad people are protesting and marching, but I'm worried about what the aftermath is going to be because of all this closeness and COVID-19. The pandemic is still out there. So we're hosting a Candlelight Vigil. We're asking people on Monday night at 9 p.m. for 9 minutes to hold a candle and to reflect on the way George Floyd died, and then to look to the future and think about what can I do personally? What action could I take to build a relationship with someone within my community? We're asking people to take a selfie of themselves with the candle, to write down that commitment, and then to send it to the GAIN Facebook page. My hope is that we'll have this library of actions that people are willing to take that will again fuel the hope and let people see how powerful love can be. Because love is not just a mammy-pammy sort of nice feeling, but it's justice in action.
And that was 9 p.m. tomorrow night. with the candle, send it to the Gain Facebook page. Perfect.
Perfect.
Does anybody else have anything they want to comment? Rep Hawkins, I know you were at the discussion today. For me, it was certainly emotional when we took a knee for those 8 minutes, and that it was just it was difficult.
It's a long time.
Todd, I just want to I want to thank Reverend Harris. I mean, I've seen her in many events across the city and her leadership in our community. She said it right on, you know, and this is what we've been talking about, a movement being a series of moments. And it's those seemingly small and insignificant moments like a gathering at Capron Park on a Sunday afternoon in Attleboro, or, you know, a Zoom video panel on AACS like we have right now at 7:30 on a Sunday night. I mean, you know, it's these moments, these conversations that truly do lead to movements. That's the only thing that's ever worked in the history of our country. But I want to thank Reverend Harris, you know, on behalf of the Attleboro community, and for me personally, my God, if we can start treating each other the way Scripture asks us to treat each other, then we don't have to have these conversations, these difficult moments in our own lives. And I just want to thank you for your leadership and for everything that you're doing. And really, you know, it's so important, and we've been talking about COVID-19 here for the last couple of months, and now things are starting to transition in what is really a historic year in all of our lives. But it starts with the conversation, and I know it's so cliche sometimes when people say, well, let's start the conversation, we need action. But ultimately, we need to be able to talk to each other. And Reverend Harris, you have led us there many, many times, and I appreciate you doing that again.
Thank you so much, Paul. I do believe that that is the only thing that we can do, is have conversations that lead to systemic change in policies and practices, because we know that this country has a history of a belief system that says Black and brown persons aren't as smart, aren't as good, aren't as honest. And that's the belief system that we have to chip away at. We're not going to get through it with statistics. We're going to get there with heart-to-heart conversations. So thank you for that. Thank you for the acknowledgement and appreciation. I appreciate you too.
I'll comment. Todd gave me a clue as to what the what you were going to say, or what your aim was in your conversation tonight. And I've been kind of struggling for the last week with what we do about this. And there's a few things that are pretty obvious, but I like looking at it as an opportunity. I mean, it's in the middle of the pandemic, which seems like that's horrible. That couldn't happen at a worse time. We don't have money to spend on programs. We don't have time to vote on things. But maybe it is a good time, because not only was there the murder in Minneapolis, but the communities of color were hurt the worst by this pandemic. That's where all the hot spots are. This is the time. And what you just said, I've seen in a lot of ways. There's an awful lot of people, not just people, brown and Black people, but white people standing out there on the street, putting themselves at risk. We have the momentum now. And actually, even though it seemed kind of odd in such a chaotic time that we want to be making a structural change like that, but we've got to. And I think everybody on this page can have a role in that. Certainly me, I've got a role in that. I'm rethinking what my priorities ought to be, because this is the time. And these protests are going to get smaller. They can't keep up that momentum. If there were 300 people there this afternoon, if they did it again next week, there'd be 150 people, and the week after it wouldn't even happen. So, but we've got the momentum now, and this is the time. And I can't remember what Todd said, whether there's a positive in it or whether it's an opportunity, but it's definitely an opportunity. This is the time to get serious about it. And I appreciate you coming on the show too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. It is, when we think about systems, we have to think about what's fueling the system. So if we have systems, for example, where we say, oh, we need a new hire, well, let me ask the employees that currently work here, and all of our employees are of the same ethnic background and race, then we're going to get more of the same. So we can't keep doing that, looking for employee referrals to help us increase diversity. We've got to look at different ways to bring people into the workplace. It's making those kinds of changes that will have a larger impact over time. You think about something called the Rooney Rule in football. And the Rooney Rule says, well, I'm going to have blind resumes for coaches. And lo and behold, guess what happens? You get more coaches of color that get past the first base. And then we have more who are hired. Or in the orchestra, let's have the auditions behind the screen. Oh my goodness, we get more women, more people of color. So we have to find ways to intervene in these systems that have harmed people of color. And then we have to talk about the police brutality. And we know that it's not every officer, but the police department, as we know, started as slave patrols. So the foundation is bad. So there's a fundamental reform that needs to happen with how we police and how we do law enforcement in this country.
Todd, it's Jay. Could I just add?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Reverend Harris, it's always such a pleasure to see you. And
Good to see you.
This is a tough group to follow up. I mean, as always, you're powerful, you're eloquent, you have a really amazing way of putting it into words that we can all understand. And, my family and I, we've taken up the motto, the mantra of I understand, I'll never understand, but we'll stand. And, I feel that it's going to be, we have to fix it in our kitchen. And from our kitchen, then we fix it in our neighbor's kitchen and so on and so forth. And I think that's where the real change is going to happen. And I think you're right. The conversations, they're going to be uncomfortable and they need to be uncomfortable right now. But thank you for your leadership. Thank you for joining the call. And thank you for all you're doing for the community and for the city of Attleboro. Always great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that. I understand. I don't understand. I'll stand. That's very cool. You made me think, Jay, about how important it is for us to make these changes on Main Street, on Wall Street, and in the White House, in the State House. We have to look at all of those major places that dictate how we live and make the changes.
We have to say, when we see it, it's not okay. It's just not okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that was one of the big messages that I heard this afternoon, that not just the officers that stood by that were complicit, but all of those things are like, anytime somebody says a joke, if you don't call it out as being racist, you're also complicit. It like all of those little things that add up. It was great this afternoon in Caper Park.
Oh, that's good to hear. Glad to about that.
Anything else?
I just thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective and to have my voice heard. I'm grateful that people are talking to one another, and I'm pleased with what's happening in the city. I want to say that GAIN, the Greater Attleboro Interfaith Network, we developed a relationship with Chief Hegney and the mayor early on, and that relationship has continued. And just this week I'd written Chief, I call him Kyle, a note to just check in. And he wrote me back the most passionate response about how he felt about what happened. And that can only occur, that kind of vulnerability, that kind of openness with communication can only occur when we develop relationships with one another. So thank you, Chief Hegney, if you're listening.
And that's in politics, I always talk about, it's important to build those relationships early when it's easy. And reach across the aisle. So when things get tough, you can have those conversations.
Make friends before you need them. That's right.
Yep. All right. So I think we'll thank you so much, Reverend Harris.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. I think we'll move on to Senator Feeney. Paul, welcome.
Todd, number 14.
Number 14. I forgot to mention, number 15 is going to be the last one next week, as things are starting to reopen. Number 15 will be the last one. So, this is the next to last episode.
Well, we've come a long way, and it hasn't been easy, and there's been lots of challenges for people. But again, I just want to start off by thanking you for your commitment and everything that you're doing. Not only to bring information to people, which is kind of one way. But really open up a dialogue with so many people in different sectors, and hearing from people in the faith community and public safety, and of course nurses in the hospitals, in the school folks and parents and educators and students. And it's really been 14 amazing weeks of just a conversation. And that's not always easy to be able to facilitate that. And you, my friend, and Steve Withers, and others who have been a part of this, just you are owed a serious debt of gratitude here from all of us in the community. So thank you for doing what you're doing, Reverend Harris. I said my piece a few minutes ago, and I just want to double up on that and reiterate how thankful I am for you, and for people of faith who are coming together in a moment where we need leadership in this country, and there is such a vacuum of leadership in the traditional places where we would expect it. So we rely on others. We rely on people to step up, and certainly leaders in the faith community and others in Attleboro have really stepped up and across the Commonwealth, and we need that. We need that. So thank you for being you and for doing what you're doing. And then Todd, before I just get quickly into my update, I want to thank you and Jay Delisio. Council Delisio just brought up a great point that I think should be stated again, where he said, we have to fix this in our kitchen first. I can remember growing up, and many who know me and know my background know that I grew up in the labor movement before I became a state senator, and to me that was having the ability to fight for my colleagues and to fight for working people across the state meant so much to me. But that was instilled in me by my dad at the kitchen table when he was out doing what he did, and striking a company for 17 weeks to fight for healthcare. Not everybody has that experience, and everybody has different views and backgrounds. But for me, what really spurred me into public service was those conversations with my dad at that kitchen table and my mom, and learning about their struggles and how to fight for things. And to Jay, Delisio, and to you, Todd, you guys are great dads, and I've seen you in action. I've seen the way you have conversations with your kids, and that is going to make a huge difference going forward, because they're watching. They're watching. Trust me, as somebody who is, where I am because I watched my dad, they're watching you, and they're listening, and they're learning. I had a conversation with a constituent of mine in another town the other day. Him and his wife had reached out after the murder of George Floyd and said, Senator, we need to talk. And they want to talk about some legislation. And, we had this great conversation about them and their lives and their experiences. And this gentleman said to me, he was talking about his kids. And I said, have you had that conversation yet with your kids? And it's an interracial marriage, and his kids are of mixed race. And both parents said, yeah, we had to have that conversation. And that conversation for our Black and brown brothers and sisters is not the conversation certainly that we're having when they tell them how more likely they are to be killed, at the hands of people that we're supposed to be able to trust. That is a conversation that's happening at kitchen tables all across that community, and something that we will never experience and that I will never experience. But my commitment was that if you're going to have that conversation with your kids because you're worried for their safety, then we're going to have a conversation with our kids too. And we're going to have a conversation about what it means to be of the human race, to be kind to each other, to love, as Reverend Harris said. So it was really, Jim mentioned it, kind of just having this week of really inward reflection and thought and what can we do? And that was a powerful moment for me, not just as a state senator, but, as a human being in a community that, these conversations have taken place. So I thank you all for what you're doing. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, Jay and Todd and all the others that are paying attention to this and that have been a part of this. Have the conversation. So Todd, we've been talking now for the last few months, and quoting all sorts of numbers and, percentages and looking at data. And, often I get folks that say to me, all right, that's great, Feeney, but just boil it down. What does that mean? So, I just want to take a second to say all the trends are going in the right direction when it comes to COVID-19. We've certainly gotten through the surge. We announced that a couple of weeks ago here after the governor announced in his press conference. We've gotten to a point where we know that we can manage COVID-19 in a way that doesn't overwhelm our healthcare systems, which was always goal number one. But I also always want to preface this by saying, even though we talk about numbers going in the right direction, and then I show some optimism, those are still people, those are still families. And when we talk about, there's only 50 deaths or 60 deaths, those were 50 or 60 painful deaths where people weren't able to hold the hands of their loved ones and take their final breath. So I don't want that to get lost when we talk about the data, because It's these are preventable deaths. They don't need to happen. And if we do the right thing, we can, make sure that we're stopping the spread of the virus, slowing the spread of the virus, and saving people. So, but with that, I just want to talk a little bit about the trend. The 7-day weighted average of positive tests. So again, understanding the more tests we do, the more the raw numbers are going to creep up. So we look at a percentage of positive testing, and that's through, the traditional PCR testing, the nasal swab, and now, starting to look at different types of tests as well, and antibody testing, and, all this is going to expand. So as the testing capacity goes up, so will the numbers. But so we look at percentages. The 7-day weighted average is down. So it's been trending down. From April 15th, it is down 83%, which is great. I mean, that is a significant number, and it's the reason why we were able to move on to the next phase of reopening. The 3-day average of number of COVID-19 patients that are hospitalized is down 58% since April 15th. So again, a significant move. As far as the surge, we were talking for the last few months about surge capacity and what this meant in hospitals. I think as of this afternoon, there were probably 7 hospitals, I think, in the Commonwealth that were at surge, kind of smaller hospitals that don't necessarily have the resources of some of the larger healthcare centers. That's down 67% in the last, month and a half. So again, significant trend in the right direction. And then finally, deaths. One of the metrics, unfortunately, that we've had to use is how many people are dying. It shows the acuity of the virus. It shows the severity of the virus, and certainly looking at different demographics about, who is dying, were there, other comorbidities, was it specifically a certain age group, and kind of trying to understand that as we try and figure out this virus. COVID-19 deaths are down in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since April 15th by 73%. So it took, some severe Herculean mitigation efforts to get to this point. We're still dealing with it. The virus has not gone away. And contrary to folks that get their news off of Facebook or memes, the weather has nothing to do with it when it comes to the virus and the science, the virology of it. But we just want to make sure that people understand that, yes, we got to a place where we can safely reopen with certain guidance and guidelines, but that the virus didn't go away. We still have to deal with it. As Reverend Harris said earlier, these protests and marches have been truly remarkable to see. But for every, good feeling that I get that people are out there, feet in the street, making a difference, I just have this pit in my stomach that, we're going to see folks get sick from the virus. And, that's a trade-off that individuals have to understand. And certainly, when it comes to manage risk, people make their decisions. But I just, want to tell everybody, be cautious. Certainly, take to the streets, march, do what you have to do. But just be cautious. Make sure that you're wearing your masks. Try and stay distant from folks as much as possible. We can get our message across, hopefully, without seeing a spike in the COVID-19 virus. So those are all the good positive trends we're seeing, again, with the caveat that we're still dealing with it. People are still getting sick and people are still dying. But hopefully we're in a place now, like the governor this week announced that we're going to reopen the next phase. So we're going into phase 2, which I encourage people, if you're not sure what that is, go to mass.gov/reopening. Check that out so you can understand the certain retail establishments that can open up starting tomorrow. Restaurants, obviously, which we had a long conversation about last week, are starting to reopen outdoors right now, which we're dealing with a lot of the logistics and things like that. And I'm sure Catherine Farrick is going to get into that tonight. But we're in phase 2, heading in a positive direction. On the state Senate, hopefully we'll be acting this week on a bill that the representative voted on and supported last week in the House on vote by mail, remembering that we have an election coming up in September, primary on September 1st, and then a general on November 3rd. So, people have to get out and vote. We're trying to figure out a way in the legislature where we can protect people as much as possible, but make sure that people have the ability to vote. And what a topical conversation when we're dealing with what we're dealing with on multiple different levels now, to talk about the importance of participating in democracy by getting out in voting. If there are folks that feel disenfranchised, you have the power to make a difference on September 1st and November 3rd. If there are folks that think that there's nowhere else to go, that they can march, but nobody's hearing them, you have the ability and the power to go out on September 1st and November 3rd. And for other people that vote every single year, you know, there's so many in Attleboro that we call them the super voters. They're always there. They're always making their voices heard. We want to make sure that they can safely be able to do that. And if that's by voting by absentee ballot, you know, by doing an early vote in certain locations, then we want to be able to do that. So Representative Hawkins and his colleagues in the House made some great efforts last week, and hopefully we're going to deal with that, I think, in the Senate on Thursday. So with that, Councilor Kovas, thank you. I look forward to next week. I don't know what I'm going to do on my Sunday nights with all this time. We stopped doing these, but I'm sure we'll find something to do. So I appreciate everything you do, and thank you to everybody that's on the call tonight. And be safe. And as always, reach out to me if there's anything I can do. 617-722-1222, 722-1222, or shoot me an email to paul.feeney@masenate.gov, paul.feeney@masenate.gov. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Paul. Always a pleasure. Next up, we have Representative Hawkins. Jim, welcome.
Congratulations.
Spent all weekend with you, so it's yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering how Councilor Delisio looks like he'd been in the sun, where he was today. Well, what was I going to say? Number 14, I always start by saying this, and Senator Feeney said it also. It's an amazing service that you've done for the city. And I've got a pretty good idea. I don't have an idea how much time you spend on this. It's always well prepared. There's always an agenda. There's always links set out. You're always recruiting people to come on. And you've had a wide spectrum of leaders from the city on this, from business to schools to workers. I can't say public safety, on and on, military. You've done an unbelievable job. And this is a time when people want to know what's going on. And they'd rather see the people and hear the people firsthand than read about it somewhere. A lot of work. I think I congratulate you. 15 of these is an amazing accomplishment. So thank you for all that you've done with that. And thank you, Steve, school committee, Withers, you've been on this every week, and Jim Jones, who isn't here, but AACS has been a big contributor as well. I know where Councilor Delisio got the color from, because I was with him. I've got to say, for the 5 organizers are right on this Zoom. Senator Feeney, Councilor Kovas, just Heather Parika is the only one that's not on the Zoom. But this has been a great group to work with. I'll let Todd talk. I'll let Jay talk about it. But what a great group of people to work with. No egos involved. All just doing things for the city. I'm proud to be part of that. Very proud to be part of that, and I've enjoyed that. Senator Feeney mentioned the voting bill. I imagine that when it goes to the Senate, it'll be very similar. The plan is that ballots, not ballots, we're not going to mail out ballots, because in many districts, there's a lot of people that have moved, and the ballot would go to the old address and just sit in a mailbox somewhere, and who knows what could happen to it. So they're going to mail out invitations, postage paid. You can send back and get a ballot to either put in the mail or put in a drop box. Another issue would be for the primary, because a lot of people are independents. Should it be a Republican or a Democrat ballot? So there's really no way to just mail out the ballot. There'll be an invitation mailed out for both the September and the November elections. There was some talk, I think in particularly in relevance to the conversation about Black Lives Matter, that same-day registration, there's a lot of disenfranchised voters. But we're probably not going to do that, because there's still the concern about COVID, and that would put a lot more burden on the people in the polling place. And we only want to have a handful of people there. That's going to be challenging enough. But next year, maybe. There certainly was a lot of support for it, and I'd like to see us do that. I don't know what else about that bill. It will be, it's timely, because the invitations have to be mailed out on July 15. So I'm sure the governor will sign it as soon as the Senate has voted on it as well. I think it's good that in this pandemic, when we can't actually go into the chambers to vote, that we're getting through some important legislation. And from what I understand, we're probably one of the most functional legislatures in the country. We're ahead of the curve, which I'm very proud of, and that we're able to pass all this legislation and have formal sessions. The other bill that we voted on was the restaurant bill, and I believe, I have not bugged you, Catherine, but I know that you've been working hard on the city end of this to make provisions for the restaurants as they transition to outdoor dining. The restaurants have suffered greatly under this with only takeout service, when that may not be the main thing that they do, and they're the local businesses that support the community. So I'm really excited to see them be able to expand a little more and offer some more options so that they can get back to making a living and surviving. And the only other thing that's on my mind is there was a rally Friday night at Murray Church and the one this afternoon at Capron Park. And I think it's good that there's so many white people protesting to support people of color. And I think people recognize, and I'll recognize myself, that I haven't suffered that kind of fear, worries, limitations. But that doesn't mean there's nothing that I can do. And the conversations at the kitchen table, absolutely, we need to change the way we do things. And it's systemic. So everybody on this Zoom is in a position where we can do something about changing the system. And it's not a convenient time, and it's not going to be easy changes, but we need to do it. And I'm so grateful, Reverend Harris, for you coming on and putting an optimistic angle to that. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative Hawkins. I just have two quick questions for either Jim or Paul. First one is coming in online from Peter J. Wiggins, asking about if the libraries are included in phase 2. Do we know if the libraries are included as part of this?
I don't
know off the top of
I shared you're the technology person. I shared you that thing this afternoon. Sorry.
I can take a look. And then the second question, well, maybe while you answer the second question, I can find the answer to the library one, is about liquor licenses for outdoor dining. I was wondering if either of you could talk a little bit about what's going on with that and when.
The bill, the Senate still has to take up the bill, and it would relieve them. And Senator Feeney said this last week. It would relieve them. They don't have to go to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. They have to notify them, but they don't have to get the permit. And then it's up to the city, which is probably what Catherine Farrick is going to do, to change it. So they can still sell sealed containers of alcohol for takeout service, and they can sell service. They'll be able to sell alcohol and the outdoor dining. So the change was that it doesn't, I guess that a permit takes 6 or 7 months when restaurants are applying one at a time, never mind if they all applied. So that was the reason for that.
Yeah, and just an update, Jim mentioned that it was, they did it in the House last week, voted on it. We still have to do it in the Senate. However, the governor did include the language from my bill, from the bill that myself and Representative McMurtry filed independently. He included that language in his order of last week. So there's some confusion that, whether or not it would still take legislative approval. But either way, the process is ongoing. Hopefully we'll have that to the governor's desk in a matter of days. And like Jim just said, and we talked about it last week, he's 100% right. What it would do is basically carve the state kind of bureaucracy out of the process, so that the city or town, the municipality, would have the right to be able to just issue a final license after their own process. So keep it in mind that every city and town has kind of a patchwork of different ways they do it, but to be protective of abutters, to be, to make sure that they're getting sign off by fire chiefs, police chiefs, and all that sort of thing. So it's coming. It's happening. The process is ongoing, and I think there's a lot of momentum behind getting it done as expeditiously as possible.
Perfect. And I looked at the thing from earlier today about the guidance for phase 2. It doesn't explicitly talk about libraries, so we'll have to look into it a little bit more.
Thank you, Todd. That was from my phone, but I don't know how to do the technology. So.
Perfect. All right. Anything else for Jim or Paul? All right, then I think next up is Catherine Farrick. the Attleboro Economic Development Director, to talk a little bit about these restaurants opening up. Catherine, welcome. I think I need to unmute you. Hold on. Ask to unmute. I don't know if I can. There you go.
I think I'm muted now. Is that correct?
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent.
Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This is about my bedtime, which is why I'm not showing video right now, but my baby tends to sleep from like 7 to 5, so this is right in my bedtime. But I'm happy to discuss a little bit about the outdoor dining. First and foremost, I would love to commend the department heads at City Hall. They've been incredibly quick and very flexible in working on this guidance when, directives from the state and new questions seem to pop up absolutely every day. It's been a moving target, but we have produced an application for businesses that are seeking to expand their premises to include contiguous sidewalk or parking lot space. That has been posted to the website. There is some additional guidance from the police chief that came about that I may include as a subsequent draft, but you can certainly use the form that's up on the website now. It's just a very minor change. But yes, we're working to streamline all the systems so that we ensure that public and health safety are ensured. But at the same time, we're trying to make it easy for the businesses. So the way that it works is if you fill out the application and you sign it off, you return it to me, and I act as a quarterback, and I toss the football to each of the different departments all at once. That way the review process is condensed. You don't have to wait on one department before you go to the next, that type of thing. And everybody knows where you are in the queue. Really what the department heads are looking for are things like clear barriers between the dining area and any parking that may be around. They're looking to maintain access and safety, ADA standards, et cetera, on sidewalks, just making sure that people can safely and quickly, if they need to, pass by the dining area. They're looking for, obviously, health protocols to ensure that individuals and tables aren't seated too closely together. If you want some kind of a canopy, that's fine. But, if you have a tent where all 4 of the sides zip up, that's going to be a problem because that's basically indoors. So the guidance goes through each of those steps for businesses that are seeking to reopen. They don't necessarily need to call in an expert to do a new plan or anything like that. But, some kind of a drawing of the dining space with some measurements is probably a good idea. But anyway, each of the departments will be reviewing it simultaneously. It includes contact information for each of the departments if you do have any questions for them. But I'm happy to serve as the kind of quarterback on the application process. There's a separate kind of regulation process that I'm still working out through the solicitor. I don't believe that it'll cause much of a delay. We have a meeting set up on Monday to discuss how the process of approvals and everything like that will go, and also whether or not we need to have an emergency order be submitted to the municipal council for things like waivers of fees and accepting the process and procedure formally. So parts of this are still unfolding. We're still awaiting some legal guidance on just tiny minutia issues. But again, I would like to thank all of the department heads at the city who've been very flexible and very eager to help the businesses get back up and running. And also all the counselors that I've spoken to so far who have been very supportive of our local business community and really have contributed some great insights to this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you for pushing this through. I know your phone's been ringing off the hook with restaurants calling all day and night. And I appreciate your efforts to try to listen to them and expedite the process of getting this pushed through. I also know that I've talked to President Cooper on the council, and he's mentioned that if we need to have an emergency meeting on Thursday night to approve anything to help out with this, that he's more than willing to call that meeting. So anything else to add? Anything else going on?
Well, I mean, I think that the other piece has been addressed by our legislators, and that's the liquor licensing piece. There are a couple of gaps of information that we're facing here, and we're not alone there. liquor licensing board representatives have been reaching out to other communities and, trying to make sure that everybody's understanding the message the same way. They're trying to get feedback from the state. So, everybody's really trying to get this last piece put together. But I mean, as it goes for the outdoor dining, I think that, our process is pretty clear for that at least.
Perfect. All right. That's all I had. Does anybody have anything else for Catherine?
Catherine, it's Jay. I just want to say the task you have ahead of you, it's a huge task, but I think you're coming in, you have the right mindset. The feedback I'm hearing from businesses is really great. I think just being able to get the economy going again in some facet, getting it reopened is going to be huge. So keep up the good work.
I'll say I've had a couple conversations with Todd in a couple restaurants, and I didn't call you because I heard what you were doing, and I felt like you needed a little space to do your job. But I heard all compliments that you were doing an awesome job for quickly changing, evolving tasks. So thank you.
Yeah, I was trying to follow a set deadline because we had, a couple of meetings, and I told people, this is when I'm going to get you this, this is when I'm going to get you this. And it kind of, the way that it unraveled, I know that there were a lot of people chewing on their fingernails there, but we were able to successfully follow our timeline and keep to schedule exactly as we'd planned. So everything went off much better than I was hoping.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Next up, we have Councilor Delicio. Jay. Another person that I've spent the whole weekend with.
I know. Well, what a great cause for the weekend. We just had our third drive-through food drive yesterday and today. Again, we put the call out to Attleboro. Attleboro responds as they always do. The generosity was really overwhelming. And, even with everything else going in the world, it was really just another example of what this community is all about. So we were collecting food donations for St. Teresa's, St. Joseph's Food Cellar, as well as the Hebron Food Pantry and a couple of the others, some of the lunch programs, meal programs. And it's funny, we continue to grow and grow. The Facebook, we have a lot of fun with the Facebook Lives. I am now responsible for Jim Hawkins and his new addiction to going live. So that's on me. But Jim, what's great about this group, and as mentioned earlier, it's Todd, it's Senator Feeney, Rep Hawkins. We have former Councilor Heather Parika. We got together back in April, and we just asked that we kind of talking about what do we do, how do we help. We still don't know the extent. Heather had reached out to Senator Feeney. I'd reached out to Senator Feeney, who was just coming off doing one, I believe it was in Sharon. And we said, hey, we can do that here. And we put it together in about 4 days. And the response was so overwhelming. The thank yous, the stories that we hear. We had a gentleman this morning come up. He was there yesterday. I think he said he was in his late 70s, early 80s. He was out yesterday, Vietnam veteran, and he goes, you know what? I've been hungry. I know what it's like. So I went home yesterday after dropping off the food, and I said, I still have more money. So he went out to the store with another carload of food. So, the reality is, and Todd and I were talking about this morning, is we didn't have the number of cars driving through that we usually did today for a Sunday, but the amount of food in the cars that came by, they were filled to the brim, bags and bags. It's just great to see the community. And every time we're like, hey, thanks for your support, overwhelmingly it's like, no, thank you. Well, we're all in this together. So what's next? We will be doing something in July. We are working on partnering up with the Attleboro Farmers Market to do kind of a stuff a truck where we'll have the Hebron Food Pantry truck at the market. So people can come on a weekly basis, and we'll probably still do a big one monthly, but we're still looking at really what that's going to look like. But I'd be remiss if we didn't thank the Tellier family and Clarissa. Of course, Firefly Theater Company for their support. They've been with us. Our families have been great. I know my son Ryan's been with us 2 days. Well, actually all the days. and he's kind of our gopher. Ryan, go for this. Ryan, go for that. And he does it with a smile. Todd's son was there helping out today. We had, a couple congressional candidates. We had a state Senate candidate come by to help out, which is real nice because we keep it non-political because it's not about politics, it's about people. We had Congressman Kennedy at the one at the beginning of May, which was great. Just a lot of really, really good support. Councilor Blair, Peter Blair came by and spent a couple hours with us yesterday helping out. Our good friend Dave Kane from WARA came by, even did a Facebook Live with us. So, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of fun, but the need is real, and the amount of food that that was donated this weekend, the sad reality, it'll probably be gone by Thursday. So even if we're not out there, there's some great agencies, there's some great charities, food sellers, food pantries who could really use the help. So don't wait, for the farmer's market. Don't wait for the next drive-through food drive. Reach out and do what you can. So thank you to everyone again. Said a million times, Attleboro's at our best when we come together, and we came together. So thank you very much, Attleboro.
Perfect. And I can't agree more with the camaraderie and the group that's there, just sort of working together and putting people first is a lot of fun. It's touching to see. Jay, I had one other question. Could you, without getting into too many details, can you talk a little bit about the budget process and what we have
Sure.
coming before us?
Absolutely. So we're in the beginning stages of what's going to be one of the toughest budget cycles we've seen. And that's in, due in large part, I'd say 99.99% because of the COVID pandemic. And that has led to an abridged budget season. I've spoken with some of our peers in other towns who sit on the Board of Selectmen or the council in other cities and towns, and they're dealing with these same challenges. So we've already started the budget process, and we've completed the budget hearings with the department heads. Although we didn't bring down all of the department heads, Deb Gould, our city auditor, who's really kind of been acting as our financial advisor, has been a great liaison between the council and the department heads, making sure that we're well aware of any challenges they have. And I'll talk about this in a second again, but it's a level funded budget for the 7th year. What that means is the cost of services and goods go up every year, but yet if we're operating in the same budget without any sort of revenue increase, especially in this year, it's essentially a budget cut in itself. We've met with the police, the fire, DPW, water, wastewater, citywide, health, the health department, the school department, parks and forestry, and they have some real challenges out there. Those guys have the biggest piece of the pie, so we want to make sure that we're understanding what it is they need to be successful and what does their success mean to each of us and each of you out there. Again, each department has been presented a level funded budget, which essentially is a budget cut in itself. No department has the funding they need to operate 100% they want to, but they've all done a nice job of sharpening their pencils and making sure that they have what they need to ensure their departments are able to provide the essential services to Attleboro residents. Part of the challenge we're facing is we're seeing that local receipts are down, our revenue. And that's not just in Attleboro, but that's at the state and the federal level, and that's due to COVID-19. The municipalities are waiting for final numbers from the state, who are waiting for final information and numbers from the Fed. So we're expecting COVID relief money to come in from the Fed, which will be used to offset some of the lost revenue. There's still a lot that we're waiting on. However, the mayor and the new budget director, Jeremy Stahl, presented a level funded balanced budget with no layoffs, which is great. And that's really what we needed, what we wanted to see. We didn't want to see any layoffs. So it was good to get that. Right now, the council is deliberating what cuts, if any, that we're going to be making. So the last 2 weeks and for the next upcoming 2 weeks, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, which I chair with Councilor Kovas as the vice chair, has been meeting every Tuesday through Thursday. We'll be doing that for the next 2 weeks. The public hearing for the fiscal 2021 budget is June 16th at 7 p.m. and that'll be done via Zoom. So, you know, Todd, it's there's a lot going on, as you well know. You and I being on the same committee, it's limited what we can talk about. But the challenges are real. These are the things that we're facing, and every city and town across the country is really facing the same very same challenges. So, Steve and Todd, what you two are doing with this the last 14 weeks is vital. I think getting the information out, getting the people that you're able to get together to get the information out, because what all of us on this line do, it's really easier when we can have an avenue like this to get the information out, because there's so much misinformation's out there, and this helps to kind of eliminate a lot of that. Again, I just want to recognize what everybody's going through out there, and, you know, hope and love. I think that's really what it's going to come down to. And again, Reverend Harris, you're amazing. And thank you for all you do out there.
Hope and love. Perfect. And last but certainly not least, Steve Withers, we started this 14 weeks ago. Welcome again.
We did. Thank you, Todd, for putting another one of these together. You've definitely been the ringleader, so thank you.
So what's going on with the schools?
What's going on with the schools? So not much new to report, just kind of updates on information I gave last week and the last couple of weeks. First, there's technically 2 weeks of school left. Everyone should have received their lesson plans for the final 2 weeks this past Friday or maybe over the weekend from their teachers. And these were going to include lesson plans both for this week and next, and then also some enrichment options or opportunities for the summer. These lesson plans are going to be a little bit different in that they weren't going to be digitally based as they have been for the last several weeks. And that is because the next item on my list that we talked about last week is that Chromebooks are to be returned over the next week. And all students should have gotten an email as to the date and time they should go to their schools to return their Chromebooks. This includes both our students who borrowed Chromebooks at the beginning of remote learning back in March, and also students in our 5th and 9th grade who were the first students to receive Chromebooks at the start of the year this year. And that's because there's been a recall on those and just some work that needs to be done to get them ready for the fall. So all students over the next 2 weeks will be going back to the school to return their Chromebooks if they have them, and then also on another date to return items from their lockers in high school and middle school, or to get their items back from their desks in elementary school. The bit of exciting news that we have is that graduation is this week. It is Thursday, June 11th, and we're happy that we're able to do it at least pseudo in person and live rather than a fully digital event. As I described last week, it's going to be a drive-up graduation in which students drive up in their cars, are dropped off in batches, and then they can walk up to an actual stage, walk across the stage, receive their diploma from the school committee and superintendent, and then get back in their car and drive on. So this is important for a few reasons. One, it's at the Attleboro High School, which is important to students. Secondly, that act of walking across the stage and getting the diploma might be something we take for granted, but that was something that the students really wanted to experience. And 3, we were able to get it done in June and in person before a lot of our students move on to their military or career obligations, which many do at the end of June, beginning of July. Finally, the last thing I would say is just in response to a couple of questions I'm already starting to get, which makes sense, is what's going to happen with the fall? What are the plans with the fall? And the answer to that is that it's way too early to know. We have to see what happens with the virus, with if there's another reoccurrence or a second phase, if it starts then, if it numbers continue to get better. But the school district has prepared by ordering and getting all the PPE materials that we would need to have an effective opening, whether it was all students coming in at the same time or not. So we'll have those masks, those materials to be able to open in public, kind of under the guidance that we see now. And that's the goal, and I think that's the hope, unless something happens that we don't wish to, and in that case, we could continue remote learning, or what some districts are doing that a lot of people have asked me about is kind of dividing the district into two groups so that there's less students in the schools, where one group goes 1 week and has the next week off. And so, that's a possibility if keeping the numbers down is necessary, but it obviously creates a whole bunch of hurdles logistically and for families. So it certainly wouldn't be the goal. As of now, the district is planning and getting ready to go back full time in the fall.
Excellent. And thank you so much for everything you and everybody on the school committee is doing. I know it's been a huge undertaking to sort of adjust to this remote learning and all of that. So I certainly appreciate it. Does anybody else have anything to add before we close it out? All right, then. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you all next week. Reverend Harris, you're amazing. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone, thanks, Todd. Thanks, Steve.
Todd.
Thanks so much.